Okay, this is part two of Ireland and the EU. So, EU policies. EU policies are major programs that are designed to help specific categories of people in the EU. There are EU policies for EU farmers called the Common Agricultural Policy, the EU fishing industry called the Common Fisheries Policy, the EU workers called the EU Social Charter, EU consumers called the Competition Policy, and EU business called the Single European Market and the Euro. So let's look at the Common Agricultural Policy first, and it's known as CAP. So if you see the letter CAP on the short questions in your exam paper, it stands for Common Agricultural Policy. The CAP was established to give all farmers in the EU a decent standard of living. It achieves this in a number of ways. The CAP provides a free agricultural market. EU farmers are allowed to sell their produce anywhere in the EU without any barriers or restrictions. There is a totally free market. This gives Irish farmers a much larger market, over 500 million people, to sell to, and therefore the opportunity to increase their sales and profits. The CAP pays financial aid directly to all farmers to guarantee them a decent and stable income. This is called the Single Payment Scheme. The EU makes these payments to farmers to top up their income and help them to survive. In return, farmers must meet standards of farm hygiene, food safety, animal health and welfare, biodiversity and land protection. So they have to farm in an ethically right way and using sustainable methods, and they have to look after their animals properly. These payments are important to Irish farmers as they help them survive. They also help to ensure that farming in Ireland remains viable and sustainable. They supplement the income made from agriculture to ensure that Irish farmers make a decent living. There was some discussion about beef coming in from Brazil, I think was particularly, and there was a lot of fear, particularly around the time of Brexit, about England starting to bring in beef from other countries. And the main problem with why people weren't happy about the thought of beef coming in from Brazil is that the EU actually has a very high standard of how agricultural products have to be produced. They have very high standards of hygiene, of not allowing you to put certain chemicals into your animals because they know what comes out in the food, of not allowing certain chemicals in your crops. And not all countries have those same regulations. So there would be a lot of discussion and fear around agricultural products coming from countries that don't have those same regulations in place that the EU has in place. CAP also promotes innovation in farming. It spends money on research projects to come up with new ways to improve farming and to reduce environmental damage. For example, by using crop byproducts and waste products to produce energy. This is important to Irish farmers as the research can help them make their farms more productive. A cleaner environment also makes Irish farm produce more attractive on world markets, which helps Irish farmers to sell more. The CAP also protects EU farmers from competition from other countries. The CAP adds import duties to non-EU foodstuffs imported from other countries to make them dearer. This will encourage consumers to buy more EU-produced food. For example, Irish potatoes sell for €3 per kilo, and South African potatoes sell here. For example, sorry, let's do that again. Too much sun's a problem. If, for example, Irish potatoes sell for €3 per kilo and South African potatoes sell for €2 per kilo, then Irish farmers won't sell too much because people will often go for cheaper. But if the CAP adds €4 tariff onto South African potatoes, they will now cost €6 per kilo, and Irish potatoes are now cheaper, so Irish farmers sell more. The CAP also makes provisions for payments to farmers in emergency situations. For example, these payments can be used to provide relief from one-off emergencies like natural disasters, outbreaks of animal disease, for example, foot and mouth, or major market imbalances that could endanger whole sectors of the rural community and the rural economy. This is very important to Irish farmers as the CAP provides a financial safety net to support them. So that's CAP, the Common Agricultural Policy. Next is the Common Fisheries Policy, or CFP. So if you see the letter CFP in the short question, it stands for Common Fisheries Policy. The EU fishing industry is the fourth largest in the world. Fishing and fishing processing provides jobs for more than 350,000 people in the EU. The Common Fishery Policies, CFP, was devised to give those involved in the EU fishing industry a decent standard of living and to conserve fish stocks, making sure there's enough fish for everybody in years to come. It tries to achieve this in the following ways. So, number one, a decent standard of living. So prices are fixed. Prices are fixed for fish at the start of the year. This helps to avoid huge fluctuations in price throughout the year and to guarantee Irish fishermen of a decent income. So that's to give people a decent standard of living. But to prevent overfishing, then, on the same hand, every country is given a quota, setting out the maximum amount of each type of fish it can catch each year. So what that means is, let's say, for example, you're fishing for cod. You're given a quota of that you're allowed to get 10 tons of cod within the year. Okay, but they also guarantee you that the price of cod won't fluctuate. So they fix the price of cod. They say it's going to be €10 per kilo, so that you know that over the year that price won't change. So that you know if your quota is 10 tons of cod, then you know how much money you can make from your cod because the price won't change throughout the year. You'll get the same amount of money. But the quota stops overfishing and makes sure that next year there will be sufficient stock of cod so that you can keep fishing into the future. So number two, under the decent standards of living. To improve the quality of fish costs and thus help EU fishermen to sell more, the CFP gives grants to EU fishermen to buy better boats and modern fishing technology. So that's to help their standard of living. Now, to prevent overfishing, on the other hand, what the EU does is the CFP sets down limits for the size of the holes in the nets to stop immature fish being caught. So that you can't use nets that have too small a hole so that it doesn't catch fish that are too young. Also, in a decent standard of living, things you have to put up with, to increase the fishermen's sales and profits, the CFP pays for marketing campaigns to encourage consumers to buy more fish. To prevent overfishing, on the other hand, the CFP helps member states to patrol their waters and catch those involved in illegal fishing. So that is under the Common Fisheries Policy, or the CFP. Next is the EU Social Charter. The EU Social Charter is the EU's social policy. Its aims to improve working and living conditions for EU citizens. It gives all EU workers the following rights. So number one, EU citizens have the freedom of movement. This means they have the right to work in any EU country they want and to be treated the same as nationals of that country. This is one of the reasons why England voted for Brexit, because they didn't want that EU movement, freedom of movement. They didn't want people from other EU countries to have the right to come and live and work and be treated as British citizens. This can be good for Irish businesses because if they are short workers, they can hire more from the other EU countries without the need for visa or work permits. During the Celtic Tiger years, the Irish economy, and particularly the construction industry, depended very heavily on immigration from the EU states to fill job vacancies. However, it could be bad for Irish businesses because Irish people may decide to live and work elsewhere in the EU, leaving Irish businesses short of Irish workers. Number two, EU workers have the right to a fair wage. That will give them and their families a decent standard of living. All EU countries set a minimum wage. The minimum wage increases costs for some Irish businesses. They have to pay more wages to workers than they otherwise might if there was no such law. Ireland's minimum wage remains higher than in many EU countries. So don't be listening to people saying that Irish people have crap wages. We're one of the highest minimum wage payers. This puts Irish businesses at a cost disadvantage. So then the third thing covered under the EU social charters. EU workers can work only a maximum of 48 hours a week. They also have the right to public holidays and pay with 4 weeks annual paid holiday. This too can be bad for Irish businesses. In business, they rely on a lot of overtime, such as security hospitals, so on. Guards do overtime. Loads of people do overtime. So they will have to hire more employees to cover busy periods, as they are not allowed to ask the existing staff to work more than the legal limit. Obviously, this is good for employees because it means they can't be exploited by their employers, asking them to work ridiculously long hours and without, and where they have to do it. Like when I was young, about 16, 17, I got my first job. Now, this would have been before the social policy. And it was just in a chipper in Tramore. But during the racing August Bank Holiday weekend and those 2 racing weeks in Tramore, the first 2 weeks in August, which is like the top holiday season in Tramore, the owner of the chipper where we were working wanted us to work for 2 weeks straight with no days off, to not increase our pay, to work for the same amount of money as we would have been doing for working 5 days a week. So 7 days, so 14 days on the trot for no extra money, and it was way over. It would have made it like nearly 80 hours a week you were working. So bringing in things like the EU Social Charter means that people can't be exploited in that way because there are protections there. Then the fourth thing is EU workers have the right to be consulted by their employer and to take part in decision making in their company. They must be kept informed regularly by their boss of the financial situation the business is in. They must be consulted in plenty of time about any decisions their employer plans to make that will affect them and their jobs. I feel like there's a spider walking on me. It's very annoying and disconcerting. This forces Irish employers to become more democratic. Irish employers can no longer keep secrets from their employees. It's definitely so annoying. There's something walking on me. The problem with doing outdoor videos is that bugs and creatures can start walking all over you. Now I'm going to feel things walking all over me the whole time. So the next thing is the competition policy. The EU competition policy is a set of rules intended to ensure free and fair competition between businesses in the EU. Its main aim is to ensure that EU consumers get quality products at reasonable prices. It contains a number of rules. So the first rule: businesses must genuinely compete with each other and are not allowed to form cartels. So there's more than just drug cartels, there can be business cartels as well. A cartel is an illegal secret agreement between competitors in which they agree to restrict competition. The competition policy states that businesses cannot work together to rip off consumers by agreeing that they will all charge the same price for their products. They are not allowed to carve the market up between them either. Businesses must compete against each other. Thanks to the competition policy, the way cars are sold and serviced now offers consumer more options. Multi-brand car dealerships are now possible. Car dealers can operate in more than one EU country, and it is no longer necessary to be an authorised dealer to sell parts and carry out recognised repairs. Back in the day, if you had a Ford, you had to go to Ford garage. If you had a Toyota, you had to go to Toyota garage. You couldn't, each garage sold just their own cars. And if you went to just a garage that was not associated, then you got what were called spurious parts in your car. So if you had a Ford car, they would put a part in that wasn't a Ford part, it was just a generic part. But now, even garages that aren't linked to any particular car brand can put Ford parts in Ford cars. They don't have to put in spurious parts anymore. This rule is important to Ireland because it ensures that Irish businesses compete under conditions of fair competition. The second thing is businesses in a dominant position in the market, one that controls a large percentage of the market, cannot abuse their powers by increasing prices or trying to stop new competitors from entering the market. This means that smaller Irish businesses, the vast majority of Irish businesses, are small and medium-sized enterprises, or SMEs. So if you see SME in your short questions, that stands for Small and Medium-Sized Enterprises. Small and Medium-Sized Enterprises, SMEs. So these SMEs are protected against being bullied out of the market by bigger businesses. For example, the Court of Justice found HB Ice Cream guilty of abusing its dominant position where it gave free freezers to shopkeepers around Ireland on the condition that they were only to be used to stock HB Ice Cream and no other brand. The court saw this as HB trying to prevent other ice creams from being sold in Irish shops. Another example is the US computer giant Microsoft was fined by the European Commission for its practice of bundling various types of software together as a single package. The Commission decided that Microsoft had been unfair to consumers by depriving them of choice, keeping prices artificially high and stifling innovation in the software industry. So, number 3 under the competition policy. EU competition policy ensures that Ireland's state-owned enterprises cannot enjoy a monopoly position. This means they cannot be the only business selling a particular product. They must be open to competition. Ireland's state-owned companies must allow other firms to enter the markets. This gives Irish entrepreneurs new opportunities to set up businesses in areas previously off limits to them. If they offer a better service than the government's business, they will make a profit. Stop it. An example of this is, for this reason, the old state monopoly of An Post and CIE now face competition from City Post and Aircoach respectively. This leads to greater competition in these sectors, which should ensure better service and lower prices for consumers. Does it really work? Have you ever heard of City Post? I've never heard of City Post. But one area where I know that definitely came into effect was health insurance companies. VHI used to be the only health insurer in Ireland. So if you wanted private health insurance, you had to go to VHI. And under this competition policy, when this came in the EU, Ireland had to open its insurance market up. So now you have all sorts of insurance companies, and that had to do with motor insurance as well. Now, say under the health insurance, you have VHI, you have Leia Healthcare, you have Aviva, you have loads of other healthcare companies that now operate in Ireland, and VHI don't have a monopoly any longer. That's definitely a better example than, what was it called? City Post? What the fuck is City Post? Maybe if you're in a city. Have you ever heard of City Post, Michelle? Yes, she hasn't heard of City Post either. The hell they're on about City Post. Have any of you heard of City Post? If any of you have heard of City Post, tell me. It's the first I've ever heard of it. So number 4, EU competition policy prohibits mergers and takeovers that would reduce free competition. Any proposed merger or takeover must seek and obtain permission from the European Commission to go ahead. Permission is denied if the Commission believed that the merger would result in the new business having too much control over that market. This means that Irish entrepreneurs will be prevented from expanding their business by merger or takeover if the European Commission believes that such a merger or takeover would be bad for competition. And we've had this example before, but sure, why not? In 2013, the European Commission blocked Ryanair's takeover of Aer Lingus. This would have resulted in one airline controlling too much of the Irish airline industry. The Commission felt that this would lead to less choice and probably higher fares for EU passengers. So then one of the last things we need to look at is the Single European Market, the SEM. So if you see the letters SEM on the short questions of your paper, this stands for the Single European Market. The Single European Market, part of the Economic and Monetary Union, the EMU, Economic Monetary Union, EMU, the SEM, Single European Market, is part of that, makes the EU the world's largest free trade area. There are no barriers to trade between the EU countries. There's free movement of goods, labour and capital throughout the EU. Goods. Businesses can sell their products anywhere in the EU without any restrictions, such as tariffs, quotas or embargoes. Labour. EU workers can live and work anywhere in the EU. Capital. EU citizens and businesses can invest their money anywhere in the EU. The significance of the Single European Market for Ireland, or the SEM for Ireland. Irish business can sell their products anywhere in the EU, just as easily as they can sell them here. There are no barriers to trade between the 27 countries. This is a major opportunity for Irish businesses. It gives them access to more customers. They can now sell their products freely to a market of almost 500 million consumers. This helps Irish businesses to increase their sales and profits and to expand their enterprise. 2. The government of each country must invite tenders from across the EU when making major purchases. Therefore, Irish businesses can bid for government contracts in other EU countries. National governments are not allowed to show favouritism to their own country's businesses. They must choose the best quote that they get from anywhere within the EU. This gives Irish businesses the opportunity to win lucrative, that means money-making, contracts from other EU governments and hence increase their sales and profits. For example, in 2019, Aer Lingus won the contract from the UK government to fly UK government employees between Belfast and Heathrow. The SEM, number 3, the SEM has made trade within the EU easier. There are no custom checks or border controls anymore, although we now know that with Britain leaving the EU, one of the big issues was the border control and custom checks. This means that Irish goods are not physically inspected by government officials when they enter an EU country. Before the SEM abolished border checks, 60 million customs clearance documents were required every year. These are no longer needed. That's a hell of a lot of paperwork done away with. This means there are no delays for Irish businesses when they transport their products to EU countries. Fewer delays mean quicker transportation and hence lower costs. 4. Ireland's membership of the SEM provides another opportunity for Irish businesses. It is a major tool in attracting transnational or multinational companies to Ireland. They come here to get free access to the EU market. When they come here, these transnational companies may buy the raw material from Irish businesses. This leads to higher sales and profits for Irish businesses. Furthermore, they bring to Ireland the latest technologies, products and skills. Therefore, Irish businesses that deal with them acquire the latest skills. This helps to make our economy more modern and more technologically advanced. Number 5. The SEM allows for the free movement of capital. This means that EU citizens can invest their money anywhere in the EU. This makes it easier for Irish entrepreneurs to raise the capital they need to set up, run and expand their businesses. They can sell shares in any EU stock market and borrow from any EU bank. So what are some of the challenges of the Single European Market or the SEM for Ireland? So number 1, in the same way that we can sell our products all over the EU, other EU businesses can set up here and sell products in Ireland. For example, Irish cement faces major competition from Boots from the UK. Dunnes Stores faces major competition from Tesco in the UK, Lidl and Aldi, who are German. This increased competition may force some Irish businesses out of business if they cannot cope with the threat from EU companies. They must develop a unique selling point, otherwise known as a USP. So if it's a USP, it stands for Unique Selling Point, to attract new and retain existing customers. Number 2. The free movement of labour means that EU citizens have the right to travel and work in any EU country. This could have a negative impact on Irish businesses because Irish people may decide to live and work elsewhere in the EU, which would leave Irish businesses short of workers. Irish businesses may lose highly skilled Irish workers who attract to work in other EU states by better pay and perspectives. Number 3. Irish firms can no longer rely on contracts from the Irish government for sales and profits. Under the SEM rules, all government contracts must be advertised to allow all EU businesses apply. The Irish government must give the contract to the best applicant, regardless of which country it comes from. If another EU business submits the better tender, Irish businesses will lose sales and profits. So the monetary union. And the monetary union is the euro. That's the currency that we use in Ireland. Monetary sort of means money. So the money union or the monetary union. And the monetary union in Europe is the currency that all European countries use. All people within the monetary union, I should say, because not all members of the EU are in the monetary union. It's a different thing. So, for example, when England was part of the EU, or rather when Britain was part of the EU, it didn't use the euro. And there are other EU member states that do not use the euro, but most of them do. So the monetary union, part of EMU, the Economic and Monetary Union, involved establishing one single currency, the euro, for some countries of the EU and setting up of the European Central Bank, or the EBC. So if you see the, ECB, that's my dyslexia for you now. So if you see the letters ECB, they stand for the European Central Bank. The role of the ECB is to manage the euro currency and the EU's monetary policy. 19 countries have so remember there's 27 member states. So of the 27 member states, 19 have the euro as their currency. These are Austria, Belgium, Cyprus, Estonia, Finland, France, Germany, Greece, Ireland, Italy, Latvia, Lithuania, Luxembourg, Malta, Netherlands, Portugal, Slovenia, Slovakia and Spain. So what are the advantages of the euro? Number one, it reduces business costs. Irish business no longer have to pay bank charges to change currency when they are buying from and selling to other Eurozone countries. Furthermore, they don't need to worry about the rate exchange going up or down because they pay and are paid in euro. 2. Lower interest rates. Smaller countries in the Eurozone have the advantage of being backed up by some of the biggest economies in the world, such as Germany and France. The euro allows these weaker countries to enjoy lower interest rates because the euro is perceived as less risky to investors than their currency would be on its own. Lower interest rates reduce Irish businesses' costs and lead to more investment in the Irish economy. 3. Price stability. Being in the Eurozone is a guarantee of price stability. The European Central Bank, or the ECB, sets key interest rates at levels designed to keep Eurozone inflation below 2% in the medium term. This helps to ensure that many costs for Irish businesses do not increase rapidly. The ECB also manages the EU foreign exchange reserves and can help intervene in foreign exchange markets to influence the exchange rate of the euro. This can help Irish businesses who export outside the Eurozone to sell at competitive prices. Number 4. It increases trade between the Eurozone countries. A major barrier to trade, exchange rate fluctuations, has gone. This gives Irish businesses the opportunity to sell more to the other Eurozone countries and thus increase their profits. It increases tourism. People in Eurozone countries are more willing to come to Ireland because they don't have to change their money to come here. 5. It has led to greater transparency in prices in the Eurozone. Irish businesses can save money on stock and other purchases by comparing prices throughout the Eurozone easily, as they are all priced in euro, and finding the cheapest supplier and buying from him. So what are the disadvantages of the euro? So the disadvantages. Ireland has very little economic control. Ireland has very little economic control over its economy. To help the economy, we cannot adjust to interest rates as those are set for us by the ECB, the European Central Bank, in Frankfurt. So where is the European Central Bank located? In Frankfurt. To help exports, we cannot devalue our currency. If Ireland's economy falls out of sync with the rest of the Eurozone countries, Ireland could suffer. The